Hello and welcome to 5-Minute Math. Today we are looking at the Algebra 1 concept of quadratic domain and range. This is standard A.6A in the great state of Texas, and we are using item number 50 of the 2019 released STAAR test. If you haven't done so already, please go ahead and take a moment to pause the video, work this problem out on your own, unpause it, and we will look at our answers together. So we need to find the domain and range of this function right here. Now let's go ahead and define those two terms because they're unfortunately not going to be on your mathematics chart or your reference materials. So what is the domain? Well, the domain of a function is the set of all possible independent variable values. So typically we will just use shorthand and we'll say, well, the domain, those are all your x values. And that's a pretty good way to think of it. So your domain is going to be your x values, your independent variable values. Your range, on the other hand, well, if your domain is the set of all possible independent variable values, then your range is going to be the set of all possible dependent variable values. The shorthand for that is usually going to be the y values. And when we're graphing it, that usually works. But in this case, we don't have a y, we have a g of x. So it could be f of x, could be g of x, I've even seen h of x. So it's going to be the dependent value rather than simply the y values, but that's a good shorthand for it. So what do we know about the domain, our x values? Well, our x is right here inside this function. There are no restrictions on it, at least in this equation. Now sometimes we'll get a graph and we might see something that looks like this, and it's like part of a parabola. And if you see something that looks like this, okay, then you're going to have a restriction on x because it's going to go from here to here. But in this, there's no restriction. So the domain is going to be, mathematically we would say, greater than negative infinity and less than infinity. Or if you want to use words, you would just say all real numbers. There's no restrictions on your x values. And as you can see, I've got two different options right there. Go ahead and get rid of j and g just because they don't even have that. Now, what do we know about the range? Well, I'm going to show you how we can figure out the range without graphing, and then we'll double check with the actual graphing calculator. But without graphing, we should know that this is in vertex form. Look at this. So when we know we have vertex form, it's going to be like this. Y equals a x minus h squared plus k. And that's what this looks like. And our h and k actually form the x and y coordinates of our vertex. So what do we know our vertex is? Well, our vertex is going to be that 17 and then 61. That's the x and y coordinates. So if I wanted to graph this, if I wanted to go 17 and 61, it's going to be way up here. Now, it's going to be up there. Now, which way is it going to open? That actually comes from the a. The a is negative. So a negative a means it opens down. Positive a means it opens up. So it's going to be like this. Okay? Now, I'm looking for the range. So that's my up and down, right? That's my vertical. So I need my y value. So this is at 61 right here. So since it opens down, that means y is going to be less than or equal to anything below 61. So that's going to be f, but let's go ahead and graph it just to double check. So I plugged it in here to the y equals, using the y equals button. Let's go ahead and graph this. If you notice, we're not going to really see much of anything if we look that close. We need to go ahead and zoom out if you're doing it for the first time. And we're going to see it's downward facing. It's got a pretty high y. Let's go ahead and trace this up to the top. And look at that y. Right about that 61 is our vertex, which is what we said. Everything below that, so our answer is F.